Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri, and our next guest is an author. He's a counterterrorism and intelligence analyst, and his new book, The Plot to Betray America, How Team Trump Embraced Our Enemies, Compromised Our Security, and How We Can Fix It, is on shelves now. Put your hands together. Please welcome Malcolm Nance. Let's hear it. Sir, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here.
Would you say this is the third in the trilogy, or are we going to keep going for the plot two?
No,
the plot two?
This is the third in the trilogy, and this is the cap. Because one of those remedies that I recommend in how to fix it, was impeachment. So this book, let me recap the other books. I wrote 3 books because the history that we're going through required that. The first book, The Plot to Hack America, was written and published 6 weeks before the election. In fact, I wrote it in 5 weeks. And I had this sort of hair-on-fire writing that we do in the intelligence community because I was the first person in US media to actually go on air the day before Donald Trump said, "Russia, if you're listening." And I said, the nation is under attack. The United States is under attack. And it's an asymmetric attack. It's an information warfare attack. It's a political warfare attack. And it was designed to do 2 things. One, to put Donald Trump in presidency so that he could support the objectives of Vladimir Putin. The other, of course, was if Hillary Clinton were to become president, to create chaos and mayhem in our government by using these lies and information that was launched like cruise missiles against our country. So if you consider a lie as a explosive payload in a cruise missile, well, the internet is the air that flies on, but the propulsion system is Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and it flies and it brings that information right to your brain. So when I wrote Plot to Hack America, that was designed to explain to everyone how the Russians did it, what systems had to be in place, what the effect of it was, why WikiLeaks did it, why they decided to be the laundromat for this, and to warn that it was the mindset of the American public that was being hacked, not the DNC records. All that fake information that 180 million Americans read was designed to frame your mind around 2 what we call meta-narratives. Trump good, Hillary Clinton evil. And if you think about it, that was the framework for the election. So I wrote that book and got it out.
Would you also say that the meta-narrative there as well, maybe not in that moment, but what happened afterwards was not just Trump good, Hillary bad, but U.S. institutions bad, or the way that we view our institutions is inherently bad? That
meta-narrative would happen after the election to a certain extent. And that was my second book in the plot trilogy, The Plot to Destroy Democracy. If anyone walks away from anything that I'm saying here today, believe this: democracy is under a worldwide attack right now. There is a strategy being played out, which is spearheaded by Russia. And you know, the worst part is, don't believe me. The Russians are writing this themselves. Watch Russia Today. Follow Julia Davis's Twitter feed, an analyst who monitors what they say on television. They're having a grand old time. But what they are doing, and what Vladimir Putin is doing, is he is re-engineering, started with Europe, he's re-engineering liberal democracies around the world by funding right-wing, conservative, neo-fascist movements, and he is using them and their elections to vote democracy out of power. So they literally weaponized freedom of the ability to choose your leadership by creating these bodies like Marine Le Pen's Front National in France. He gave her $50 million to defeat Emmanuel Macron on the promise that day one, France would withdraw from the European Union and break it, and withdraw from NATO and break it. And she was directly cash funded by Vladimir Putin. The government of Austria, OFD, was a party that was organized by two Nazis from World War II in 1952, 2 SS officers. It now runs Austria. And they had a scandal where the videos were found of members of their government in a private villa in Spain talking about taking money from Vladimir Putin. They had a contract between United Russia and the OFD and Austria. This is not just those countries, it's everywhere in Europe. Now, the United States was actually last on that chain, and that's why Plot to Betray America is how the Americans organized to do a few major things. One, weaponize the hatred that some of the less educated that we have in our country have in distrust of government in order to damage government so that they could make money for themselves.
Right. I wanted to ask you, excuse me.
Sure.
I should have done that before I started talking. I
choke people up.
I wanted to ask you, what is it about far-right ideology that aligns so well with this particular form of autocracy and capitalism that they are promoting?
Yeah, you know, that's an excellent question, because one of the things that I have to do in every book, like Plot to Destroy Democracy, was really about Putin, his plan, his ex-KGB followers, their strategy, their active measures. This book is Donald Trump and his team, but I still have to go back to Putin.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I did was I went to his office in Dresden, Germany, and I hung around, and I'm an ex-intelligence officer, so, game knows game. So I went back there, and I couldn't feel how Putin has a baby spy. He's in an office with a bunch of big, fat old guys. Old guys don't want to do the job, so they send out the new young guy. He learns in his years in Dresden how to manipulate people. He is a human intelligence officer. His job was to take people who came from the West, turn them against their own government, pay them, a fraction of the money, and then blackmail them to continue doing their job. When the Soviet Union collapsed and East Germany collapsed and was reunifying with the West, he went and got the dossier of every person that they had turned into a spy that was a businessman or a student in the West. And it said that he used that to make business connections by blackmailing them. Vladimir Putin is a master of blackmail. When he was director of the FSB, he got Boris Yeltsin off of a corruption charge by blackmailing the prosecutor general by putting video cameras in his hotel room with 2 hookers. I mean, this man knows how to manipulate people. So to find an avaricious, narcissistic, ambitious man like Donald Trump who only wants that Russian money that comes from oil wealth, that comes from natural gas wealth, and that illicit money that came from liquidating every asset in the Soviet Union, from mailboxes to dog parks to atomic submarines, that money was being put into real estate all around the world. And the Trump organization got some of that money and became enamored with it. But the Russians aren't stupid. When you're a spy master and you run a country like that, and you want to influence your strategic adversary, the United States, and you've spent your life as a communist, and the communist goals were to destabilize Western democracy to advance your own, and then you become an autocracy that does have some money, Vladimir Putin kept the exact same goals. To make Russia great, you have to tear America down. And what's the best way to do that? As Nikita Khrushchev said, from inside. We will bury you, but that burying is going to come with your own shovel. You will pay us for it, and you will dig your own grave for us, and then you'll jump in.
Do you associate, or do you think what's worse for America is the sort of social media attack on the part of, a small group of people who were running social media accounts and bots inside Russia, or the oligarchical money that was pumped into right-wing candidates throughout the country who have since backtracked in a lot of ways how they feel about Russia? I'm talking about Lindsey Graham. I'm talking about Rand Paul.
Right.
We can talk about the NRA.
And this is what I try to spell out in this book, all right? This is not just Russian military intelligence wakes up one day. They
McConnell as well, right?
Right, yeah. But they get some tasking. Russian military intelligence gets tasking from the Kremlin that says, oh, send out all these bots and create all these little information bubbles, and let's hope the Americans bite that. They don't work that way, all right? Again, what you are seeing, and why I quickly recognized this when, once the DNC was hacked, I saw a strategic intelligence operation being played out, directed by a man that was a strategic intelligence officer. I mean, it would be like putting me in charge of President of the United States. I'd start running ops on day one, So Vladimir Putin decided he was going to use every aspect of his power to take the United States or take on the United States. But to do that, you don't pull your punches when you come at the king, right? You best not miss. So what he did was he used information warfare with Russian military intelligence, bots. He used false narratives that were put out into the information sphere, the Internet Research Agency, who pretended to be Americans. He used intelligence subcontractors and vigilantes and people who ate what we call influence agents. Maria Butina, who was sent to bring in the National Rifle Association and make Russia look good. And they did. They did that over 5 years. They worked the NRA to where Russia was favored and that the NRA was going to Moscow all the time in a country that does not allow you to have guns, except, you know, a hunting shotgun. But they're all licensed, regulated, and strictly controlled. That was an influence operation from a spy master. Then you had the same operation started on the evangelicals in 2010 with their Protecting Christianity conferences that are held in Moscow every year. Franklin Graham is a very good friend of Vladimir Putin. Now you start to see that it is not just a bot. It is a strategic arc where a wave of Russian influence funded through oligarch money, because the oligarchy in Russia is run by Vladimir Putin. Look, this is a man who took on the St. Petersburg mafia in the early 1990s and managed to use KGB officers and assets to bring the Russian criminal class under control. So if you don't think he can do that with a few television moguls, he does. He'll take your assets, strip them away, nationalize them, and sell them off to your friends, and then you might wake up with a bullet in your head.
What do you say when people play devil's advocate and they say, well, what about America and the CIA and our intelligence community? Isn't that a form of the KGB? And don't we have our own oligarchs who in many ways could be considered very close to the presidents and the leaders of our country? You think of Jamie Dimon, you think of Tim Geithner, who was in Obama's administration, made millions and millions and millions of dollars liquidating homes. Like, how do we say one is much worse than the other? Is it just because one is attacking us?
No, well, fundamentally, the difference is we are not inherently evil. Okay, we are not. When I say that Putin, you notice I'm on Putin a lot today, because to say anything about Trump and Team Trump, I have to tell you who the supervillain is in this story. This is literally like Hans Stavro Blofeld, right, and Goldfinger. He is no longer a spy master. He is a billionaire of his own right who is using money to buy people, places, and things.
He might be the richest man in the world as far as we know, like secretly
well,
the richest man in the world,
you
right?
know, I lived in the United Arab Emirates, and those
enough.
people over there, they're trillionaires, but they're kind enough to say that they only have a couple of $1 billion. But Putin may have as much as 200 billion illicit dollars stashed away. But you got to remember, he was using all aspects of the state to steal money. He was using money and intelligence to intimidate every oligarch. So do we have an oligarchy? Yes, of course we have an oligarchy in the United States. But they don't really run everything, because those votes really matter. Your anger really matters. You could put a stop to abuse through the financial system when it really matters. In Russia, one man runs it. The oligarchy are his executive officers. He controls them with intelligence staff from the FSB. As you see, critics wake up dead routinely. Anyone who wants democracy or freedom of speech, you have the trappings of it, but you get killed. That organization engineered the election of Donald Trump, and as the Mueller report stated, Donald Trump knew it was happening, knew they were benefiting from it, and relished those benefits. And we saw that just yesterday in the the trial of Roger Stone,
Right.
where he was communicating directly to Donald Trump that he had direct access to WikiLeaks information from the earliest days of the Democratic National Committee's hacking, which tells you the arc from Russia to WikiLeaks to Team Trump led right to the White House. And, of course, they don't particularly care for the way we run our government. So Donald Trump is essentially managing what he wants, which is a constitutional autocracy. You have the trappings of a constitutional republic, like the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, but Donald Trump only rules for 40% of this country. and the other 60% be damned.
Now, it's called The Plot to Betray America, and I want to talk about the liquidating of basically Russian assets and funneling them into Putin's personal account, because it seems to me that is in some ways what Donald Trump and his associates are doing via the tax cut, via the tax bill, just funneling money back into their donors via Trump properties all across the country and funneling tax dollars into them. Is there a sense that he is taking a page from Putin? Obviously, he can't do the kind of things Putin did in terms of liquidating the assets of the country, but there seems to be a version of that taking place.
You know, there's a joke that I've written in the book that goes around some of us who are in the former intelligence people, that we say there's a rat in the White House, and it's all capital letters RAAT, and that stands for Russian Autocrat Advisory Team. It is almost like there is an organizational body who comes in and says, listen, Donald, in 2001, Vladimir Putin brought all the news media under control, so you better get onto it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Putin did. He took over the media because he was criticized once for the loss of an atomic submarine, right? You see this narrative framing and crafting and guiding from Donald Trump. I will make you distrust everything that sits before your lying eyes so that you only believe me. That is how an autocrat runs. That's how Joseph Stalin runs. And the worst part is, these people are not all communists, right, who are the bad people. Erdogan in Turkey runs this way. Sisi in...
I wouldn't even say Russia is a communist country.
No. I'm talking the old communists,
oh, okay,
the old school communists. No, Russia is what we call a neo-Eurasianist nation, where they believe that the poles of the United States, across the Atlantic Ocean, out to the liberal democracies of Europe, was the center of the world. They believed that their mission was to destroy liberal democracy in Europe, replace it with these autocratic conservatives, and that the pole would shift from Moscow to Europe, to America, to the world.
Can I ask you a really dumb question?
Sure.
Why, not that the others have been too smart, but why...
Pretty good.
Why do they care so much about autocratic leaders when capitalism functions as a free market and they can just involve themselves in the market, whether they are autocratic or not? What does it matter to them?
You know,
America does business with other autocratic leaders.
Sure, but America does business, and we, despite the fact that we're horribly capitalist, we try to be fair, right? And we want a level playing field, or at least a near level playing field, or one that advantages us just slightly, not mercilessly, right? If you go out in the rest of the world, right, and you go to Singapore, all right, one of the most expensive cities in the world, because everyone that's in that city are Chinese billionaires and millionaires who have to liquidate their illicitly gained cash, so it's not taxed. Same thing if you go to Baden-Baden, Germany, right, which was a former spa city that was a favorite of the czars. The city is practically been bought up by Russian oligarchs, because Russian oligarchs owned it in the 18th century. When Vladimir Putin came to power, of course he got rid of communism. Communism doesn't work, but he was still a devout believer in centralized government. There were a lot of regrets that the Soviet Union had left, or that Russia had left the centralized government, the Soviet Union. And he saw that they were lacking, with a very drunk Boris Yeltsin, lacking a strong leader who would guide a natural constituency into a new future. And what he did was he reached back to Tsar Nicholas I in the early 1800s, and he took his motto of autocracy, nationality, orthodoxy, belief in the Tsarism, right, the Tsarist regime, the family of the Tsars, the nationality and love of Narodnya, right, our country, and great devotion to the Russian Orthodox Church. Those were the three pillars of Tsar Nicholas I. Putin took that and then added oligarchy to it. I would say it's not only nationality, autocracy, orthodoxy, oligarchy. I would add kleptocracy to that. Steal what you can, we will keep it, the money trickles down, and then we're going to try to money launder that around the world. That, though, gives you a nation state that has the ability to play within the global capitalist system, to play above nations and flags when you have this oligarchy, because, as you said, we have oligarchs, but our oligarchs are not out there trying to essentially buy off half the world. Well, I mean, they're out to buy off half the world. Okay, that's true. But not with the intent that Russia has. They know that to make their country great, they have to destroy nations. But instead of just destroying them like we used to do in the Cold War, right, with wars, now what you do is you come in with your money, like the Chinese do in Africa, and then you change the entire electoral system to create an oligarch and autocratic-backed government in that country, and then they will vote out liberal democracy, because liberal democracy is messy, it gets in the way of your cash flow, and of course, liberal democracy tends to stop evil people. And that's why Putin's push to get Trump into office to create an American autocrat who would start hammering the fundamental pillars of the West was successful, because democracy is also slow and contemplative, and we couldn't see, even the intelligence community, the experts who were there, who watch Russia every day, they didn't think Russia would attack the United States directly, but Russia was using a doctrine where they didn't have to use cruise missiles. They invaded through information that was similar to theirs, with a conservative basis, through American conservatives, and this is why you have all these sort of Stepford wife conservative clones in Congress now, who 5 years ago, they would have been called traitors in the Republican Party if they had ever mentioned that they loved Russia. And now you have them going there because there is a pool of money that is so big that in this global oligarchy that supersedes their loyalty to the Constitution, to the flag, to you, your family, or anything you've ever done in American history. Money corrupted at the absolute pinnacle of it. Now, I'm not just saying that because, look, I am a rabid capitalist, right? I have loved this country. I have fought. I have defended every flaw in this country. My family has served in every war since the Civil War, father and son, and my niece was in combat off Yemen a year ago, right? I believe this system. I'm from Philadelphia. I was raised in the cradle of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. I believe it heartily as an African American. But what I don't believe is that people who compromise this system, who say that they have believed this their whole time, and now are in the thrall of a spy master who is from the KGB, something is fundamentally broken amongst Team Trump and the Republican followers that are out there. This is not normal, okay? This is cult-like. Or there's a pool of money out there that we don't know about that's been promised to them. And that's the only thing that listen, I have fought and have sworn to die for each and every one of you and the Constitution of the United States. There is nothing and no amount of money on the table that could make me betray it. Obviously, they have a different view on that.
We should talk about the impeachment proceedings that are taking place, the trial, and what happened yesterday, especially in regards to watching those Republican loyalists to Trump take the stage. I'm talking specifically about Nunez or Jim GYM Jordan, and how they addressed Taylor and Kent. What did you think about what you saw yesterday?
Let me use, I try, as I'm actually involved deeply in educating the nation and the world in how intelligence processes work, how we within the intelligence community in our little buildings with no windows and doors that have cipher locks on them, what we think and how we say and what terms of art that we use. And let me use a term of art from the intelligence community. When we see information that has no basis in fact, information which appears to have come from a fabulist, right? We actually have a term of art. What I saw yesterday with these theories that it was the Ukraine, the pro-NATO, pro-European Union government of Ukraine that actually hacked the DNC, and that Moscow is completely innocent and we should raise the sanctions on them, and that, you know, Hillary Clinton engineered all of this, I default to that particular intelligence community term of art. And that is, it's crazy. Okay? That was insane what we saw yesterday. It was sycophancy that American politicians literally trying to get Moscow off the hook by getting Donald Trump off the hook and setting forward an argument that this country that is in active open combat with Russia, with an insurgency that has been, you know, that has Russian special forces operating in it, who just needs NATO weapon systems that we had promised them for them to have the right to self-determination.
Do you think it's dangerous to say we're in open combat with Russia?
No, we're not in open combat, but Ukraine is.
Oh, right. Okay, Ukraine is. Thank you. I mean,
Ukraine and eastern Ukraine,
yes.
That's what they want the Javelin missiles for. The Javelin missile is an outstanding anti-tank weapon system. You aim it, you look at the tank, you pull the trigger, the missile does everything else. Right?
Forgive me, I misunderstood you.
No,
I thought you were
okay.
saying. I thought you were like saying that
the United
alluding
States
that United States and Russia via the social media were in open combat.
No. We're actually.
I worry about that language.
But we are in information war.
Yes. We've always been in a lot of ways, right?
Well, to a certain extent, in a benign way. I mean, the United States itself doesn't view it, you know, they view Russia as a near-peer adversaries. That's the technical term for them. We, in the intelligence community, call them a strategic adversary, a strategic organization that are not enemies, but at any time, you know, could be involved in military operations. But the Cold War disappeared, right? We stopped going after each other's spies, and it transformed itself into an information war. And Russia realized the West's own information systems.
Yes.
Twitter, Facebook, the internet.
Hollywood, movies.
Right, movies. Anything that is digital is a far better weapons platform than an atomic submarine.
But that is interesting because we've been the great exporter of content, for lack of a better word, for the last 40, 50 years since the advent of Hollywood. Sure, Russia and other countries have had their own TV and film communities, but we have exported Rocky, all these big capitalist American heroes all across the globe.
Sure, and you know, but the one thing that we in the United States have truly done for the last 244 years that was unique amongst the world, not just our love for constitutional republicanism, it's that we are the first nation to truly set and hold and keep dear freedom of speech. I mean, in all of the world's history, no one has truly guaranteed it like we have. Now you're a strategic adversary run by a spy, and you realize all those old communist systems of making up lies and putting them in Pravda newspaper, which nobody believed because they were all lies, and you couldn't get your information into their sphere to influence that country, was because technology was too slow, and American freedom of speech would wash over you in a second. Modern rapid technology has now made freedom of speech the weapon. Because if I'm a person at the Internet Research Agency and I'm a sergeant in the Russian military intelligence community, which happened, by the way, in 2015, 2016, and I craft a lie and I launch that lie onto the Internet, I have as much knowledge and influencing power as the New York Times, depending on what sort of tidal wave that I can put it in.
So how does a liberal democracy that maintains freedom of speech combat that?
It's a great question. Finland is doing it right now. There's a thing we call the Finnish social media methodology, where as a national effort, they bring sunlight to the process, and they educate the public. Those of us who are, you know, my age or nearabouts there remember a thing that was on television when we were kids, these public service announcements called Schoolhouse Rock. Does anybody remember those? So Schoolhouse Rock, you watch those videos, they're awesome. Right now, when I have to remember the preamble to the Constitution, the song from Schoolhouse Rock comes into my head. Finland is attacking back on every level through education, starting in elementary school. What is right? What is wrong? In America, we have the right to believe any stupid thing we want. We have a right to believe lies and propaganda. But you also have to understand those platforms, if they don't clean their acts up and allow this weaponization of lies and truth, which, by the way, kills people. There are people who kill themselves over lies. There was a gunman that went in Pittsburgh a few years ago, not the shooter at the mosque, but a gunman who read something on Glenn Beck's Blaze, who said that Obama was coming to take their guns, created a hostage barricade, and the first 3 Pittsburgh police SWAT team members who came through their door, he shot them dead on a lie that they were coming to get, that they were seizing guns that week, right? That is the weaponization of a lie. Malicious actors out there understand we, as a Western democracy, if we still believe in that, are way more vulnerable to that than, you know, Russia's not stupid. If you're going to be using these weapon systems, you do what they do. They took social media offline, and they allow most of your social media through their own internet and Facebook called vContact, right? Which means they monitor it, their intelligence agencies can craft it, they punish anybody that goes outside the parameters of it. News media is technically, it looks independent, but in fact, it's centrally controlled. China is 100% centrally controlled, to the point that they can actually use money to intimidate US platform carriers to do their bidding to keep true information out of the hands of Chinese citizens. For us, it's sunlight. Sunlight is the ultimate antiseptic.
Do you see, and we're getting tangentially down a different path here, I want to go back to the impeachment, but do you see the sort of the right-wing belief that Twitter and Facebook are censoring them and that they are shadow banning them in some ways to be similar to a want to a state control of media in some respect?
No, that's a stupid argument, okay, which, by the way, is another intelligence term of art. It's just a ridiculous argument in a nation like ours. Because if we've seen anything, again, don't believe those guys when they shout that. Believe your own lying eyes, because you can see it. No one is banning them because they are being heard. And to tell you the truth, they have a bigger megaphone because they have the President of the United States amplifying, what's the count this week? 14,000 documented, empirical, countable lies.
Well, then I guess the question is, if they know that they are not being banned, I guess my question is, why are they saying that? What is the end goal there?
Well, it's the end goal is to craft an environment where you actually allow them more freedom of speech than they're entitled to. This is also an autocratic playbook, right? I mean, it's abusing the First Amendment of the United States to say, we're whiny babies. We need more, you need to give us more places. Look, the Twitter, Facebook, all these platforms are privately held entities. And with the right lawsuit, they could be held liable for some of the things that are said there. Live streaming of the attack in New Zealand by the neo-Nazi who went in there. I was online and watched the tail end of that attack live. I'm a counterterrorism guy. My hand was going for my friends, to the phone call for my friends in New Zealand SWAT, who were already there for that, all right? We didn't need to see that. I saw that guy shoot at least 10 people. He ended up killing 50. If your platform is used for evil, you need to be regulated, right? You have a newspaper that all the advertisements are for pyrotechnics for pyromaniacs and how to set fire to buildings. We might want to take a look at your newspaper. So these are things that in any functioning, decent society, we should know that, look, if we can limit pedophilia, right? If we can limit abuses and, showing women being abused, which is common decency and humanity, then we should be able to regulate people who work for evil. And let me tell you, I get this all the time. I had an incident that occurred, or not an incident, But there was a guy named Baked Alaska. He was a blogger. 2 years ago, I met him at Politicon. He tried to ambush me, and he goes, hey, can I say, is it okay to say black power? And I was like, yeah, right, whatever. And he goes, is it okay if I say white power? And I said, yeah, right, whatever. And he goes, well, how come I can't say white pride? And I said, you can. I fought for your right to say that, right? My great-great-grandfather fought in the Civil War for your right to be as stupid as you want. But I said, let me give you some advice. In the counterintelligence world, guys like you, if I say black power, I get a frame of every person who has ever abused that phrase in American history. If you say white power, they give you a little dotted line, which makes us start wondering if you're going to fill that frame in from, people who carried out mass murders. 2 weeks later, oh, by the way, I even got him to thank me for my service, right? Which I always say, don't thank me, thank my wife. But 2 weeks later, he went to Charlottesville. And he got hit in the face with pepper spray, almost lost his eye, and he was one of the crying Nazis the next day. He was like, oh, I almost lost my eye. And I said, I wrote to him. I said, I am sympathetic for you. I'm sorry. I hope you don't lose your eye. But did I not warn you 2 weeks ago not to get that frame around yourself? You were there to create. Charlottesville, by the way, was highly organized, and it was tied in to right-wing European groups. They were actually communicating on the Discord chat communications platform. And this was supposed to be the coming out of the American right wing, to show the United States was moving to that fascist-oriented autocracy that is waving all around Europe. But I told that guy, you have freedom of speech, you can do all that stuff, but the minute you act on your freedom of speech, there is a system in place to make sure that you're held accountable. If we don't make sure technology platforms are held accountable for the evil that is done. I mean, come on, people are complaining about AR-15s. You want to regulate them, you want to control them, you want to allow people to, sue Remington and all these other companies. Awesome. That's a reasonable argument that we can have. Well, if I cause the death of people using a platform for communication, and you have a way of seeing it or filtering it out, or I amplify the mass murder of people, you might be held accountable. One quick note. I had a death threat that was actually what we call marionetted. Marionetting is a technique where a foreign power will pretend that they're American citizens and will get other Americans to come out and do things. This guy was on Twitter, and he was saying, I'm at Politicon, come watch me kill Malcolm Nance and another MSNBC analyst live. And he was putting it out in a Southern California alt-right group. And what they were doing was using this platform to get people to come witness what they thought would be an assassination. And then when the assassination didn't happen, their voices and mouths and fists would be there, hopefully, to carry out that act. That is the weaponization of technology. And if that requires a few laws, we may have to, if they don't rein themselves in, like Facebook with this ridiculous, we're allowed to lie, we're allowed to let people lie, that's freedom of speech, we may have to start treating you like a publishing house.
We have time for a couple questions from the audience. Who has a question? Right here. Hey.
Hi, Malcolm.
Hi.
When you look at some of the predictions that you made in your earlier books that have come true.
Which is all of them, by the way.
All of them. In the worst case scenario, if Trump gets re-elected in 2020, what do you predict are the greatest challenges facing not only the United States, but our allies and the institutions like NATO that are being put in place to keep the world order?
That is one of the scarier questions that I've had this week, because you clearly have read my books. The funny thing is, I write these books, but I don't read them. And last year, I had to read Plot to Destroy Democracy before I went on Bill Maher, and I terrified myself. The situation is far more grave than it looks. And, as an intelligence professional, my career, my life, was to warn my nation of threats that were coming towards us. And I have been trying with these books to give you the details of the threats as they exist, including the insider threat that we have from the President of the United States. What could be the effect next year if it's even worse than Donald Trump being elected? Donald Trump being impeached, getting acquitted by the Senate that says that he did nothing wrong, that extortion and blackmail and bribery to get dirt on a foreign power, on an American citizen by using foreign agencies and foreign governments in extorting them for their own self-defense so that their nation can survive, that is now legit politics. I can go to Korea or China and do that. This nation could.
What's going to happen?
I'm sorry?
Isn't that what's going to happen, though? I mean,
it's possible.
It seems like there have been so many of these instances where we have some kind of trial or we have some sort of show, and everyone says, well, this will be the moment the Republicans step up. I mean, they're clearly not going to step up.
Yeah, but if we're adults here, all right, and, you know, Donald Trump said this yesterday. He said, this is a sham, this sham activity. This is the Constitution of the United States playing out before your very eyes. What we are looking at is in our founding document, and this man calls it a sham, which tells you what he thinks of the system of American republicanism. He doesn't care about this. He is pushing us to autocracy. But if he's acquitted and he's reelected, you're seeing the grounds for the fracturing or possible permanent breakdown of the American experiment, which my family has risked their lives over 160 years. Ex-slaves ran away to make sure the American promise would be there for their children, their grandchildren, and their progeny. And now we're about to, you know, it's almost like you're saying, I really like this house, but I think I'll just burn it to the ground, right? And then hopefully I can put a tent up in the ashes, because that's what's going to happen.
Can I push back for a second?
Sure, push.
And I am in by no means a Trump supporter. I'm very far left.
Yeah, that's all right.
But when we say the failure, the breakdown of the American experiment, if he's reelected, isn't being reelected, voted in, part of the American experiment?
Well, we don't know how he's going to get voted in. You have to understand, he won last time by taking the efforts of a foreign agency. We also know that he tried mightily to cheat. Donald Trump cannot win unless he cheats. Right now, we are impeaching him because he tried to cheat. He tried to engineer the attack on Joe Biden. Engineer it using all of the diplomatic power of the United States to withhold our defense obligations to a country that was at war. This is the ultimate cheating. He is trying to engineer the United States government like he did his real estate deals in this city. Cheat, lie, use the mafia, right? In this case, cheat, lie, and have the Attorney General cover up any crime that he's done. He deserves this impeachment. American democracy demands that he does it. Oh, wait, I hear Jefferson and Madison yelling at me right now. Yeah, this is what is required. And if we don't do this, and the reason why Nixon got this, by the way, why it was so grave, because all of the men who were trying him, and most of the men in the United States, had served in World War II or Korea or Vietnam. And they understood the stakes. Yeah, but but we don't need tapes. We probably will have tapes. Yeah. You know the Russians have tapes of these phone calls. They have full spectrum in communications intercept of these guys in Ukraine, and they were using unsecure phone calls. I mean, if Donald Trump's got a mistress, I'd be worried, because Vladimir Putin knows all about it.
Well, on that note, as an intelligence analyst, just for fun, is the P-tape real?
No, I don't believe that's real. But I believe, look,
I will never not cling to
it's not, you know, I will never get past the Saturday Night Live image of the bare-chested Putin with the PP tape. Right. Donald, you're forgetting something. So, no. But I believe that at some point, they have blackmail on Donald Trump. Right. Look, I have this saying I say all the time, kompromat, which is how the Russians call it. I say this all the time. When you're in debt to a loan shark, you never insult your bookie, right? You never insult your bookie. You go take his kids to the playground, you wash his car, right? You do whatever he wants until your loan is serviced. Donald Trump is clearly in debt to Vladimir Putin for something. And you know, the Mueller investigation had no mandate to investigate any of that. It has never been investigated until this week. And by the way, the whole Ukraine scandal, the entirety of the Trump defense is that Ukraine did it, not Russia. Now, who in their right mind would be trying to say that Russia didn't attack us in the 2016 election when the entire consensus of the world in every investigation, we actually have their fingerprints and videotapes that were taken by Dutch intelligence of them logging into their offices and logging onto their computers.
Malcolm, I've been told to wrap.
Wrap.
But this has been a lot of fun talking to you. The Plot to Betray America is on shelves now, right? People can pick it up,
Get
as
it
well
out there on
as
Amazon.
your previous two books, the Plot books, the
Yes.
Plot 2 books.
Plot to Hack America and Plot to Betray, to Plot to Destroy Democracy.
Absolutely.
Get them all three.
Malcolm Nance, everybody, let's hear it.